The sun's in a little slightly better place right now. Still working my way east towards Milwaukee before I turn south. I have a load coming out of a little tiny town up here in Wisconsin called Prairie du Chien or Du Chien, and I'm going to the outskirts of Detroit. This is a direct delivery, so I'll be in here for the next, I don't know, 6-7 hours on this run. I got a new topic, and I like it when people chime in and ask questions or add. That helps quite a bit. I served in the Army from 1986 to 1992. And one of the things the military did, they don't do anymore, but when you had something that they needed to make go away, a piece of equipment or something, they buried it. That was just what they do. You don't want this, dig a hole, put it in, bury it, it's gone, it's disposed of, you don't have to worry about it anymore. And that's gone on since the Origins of the Universe. If in the Navy version of that, if you've got a broken piece of machinery and you've replaced it, it's kind of like, whoops, over the side, it's gone. And that was normal. I think they stopped doing that in the 90s. I think they finally got away from it, and I kind of heard about it through the grapevine. Like when you're enlisted and they had literally paint buckets or something, barrels or something, they would have the engineers go out and dig a big hole, and they would send all the enlisted scum, such as myself, and we'd toss it in. Poof, gone. That was the answer to all your problems. In a combat zone, if you have equipment you can't bring with you, they would burn it or blow it up. Burying wasn't really an option at the time of the energy. And during the Chosin Reservoir battle that happened during the Korean War, you had the 1st Marine Division falling back, surrounded by 9 Chinese divisions. And they holed up. There was Hangnam and Hagaru and a couple other places, but they actually stopped for a while, built an airfield, brought in supplies, flew out wounded people, and they had some stuff going on there for a while. And then when it was time to finish the march to the sea, they took everything they had they didn't need, they put it in a big pile and lit it on fire, because you got to make it go away. You can't leave it for the enemy. And as they pulled out, they watched Chinese soldiers come racing out of the darkness and jumping on the burn pit trying to grab stuff because they were starving and freezing. The Chosin Reservoir battle was a mess. So anyway, under the variant policy that the Army had during that time, when I first joined the Army, I crewed tanks. I was a tanker, as in the M1 Abrams. The M1A nothing tank was what I crewed. And later on, I went to flight school. But I was stationed at Fort Hood, which is now called Fort something else. I don't know what they call it. And as an enlisted guy, you get put on different jobs, different side jobs. And there was this thing that would come around. It was called duty company, and it was for the division. And basically, you would get a handful of enlisted people, and you were on what was known as ship detail, where you got some nasty job that nobody wanted to do. So they would give it to whoever was on the duty company for the entire division. So a group of us, one week, there was like 7 or 8 of us. We got a deuce and a half, and they said, "You guys are duty company." And we're like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." We're 18, 19-year-olds. They're at a bunker. There's a guy at the end of the tunnel. So we drive down and go in the tunnel, and there's some pallets with some ammunition boxes on them. Now, something to understand about ammunition is it has a shelf life. It does not, they don't let it sit around forever. I don't remember the actual numbers, but I think it was 20 years on, machine gun ammunition. Tank ammunition, mortar bombs, grenades, everything has a shelf life. And they would declare ammunition unstable or beyond its service date. And they would slowly rotate the inventory to get rid of it. So we came in there and they said, okay, all this stuff is non-serviceable. And they gave us a printout. It was a copy of a map. And Fort Hood is the biggest post, the biggest Army post in the free world. It goes on forever. And in the middle, the northern part in the middle, they have firing ranges. And if you were to stand up in the clouds and look down at the firing ranges at Fort Hood, it looks like a wagon wheel. The hub being the center, which is a mountain, and then all around the spokes, all around the edges are leaning in, aiming towards the center. And those spokes are miles long. I mean, it goes on forever. And those are the tank ranges, the firing ranges. So what they did was they went down one of the ranges towards the backside of it, and they had the engineers go out there with a bulldozer and dig a hole. And they said, okay, here's your map. You go, and I don't remember what range. It was like Crittenberger and Grounds Creek. They had all kinds of names. And they said, drive down there and put this ammunition in this hole, and the engineers will come around at some point and bury it. And we're like, all right, cool. So we start tossing these crates in the back of the truck, and of course we're throwing them because we're idiots. And they're like, be careful, that stuff's quote unstable. So we load up the truck and we start driving. It takes 45 minutes, an hour to get there. It's quite a ways, and deuce and a half's are not fast. And we're looking at this ammunition and we're saying, man, I wonder if there's any grenades in there. And in hindsight, I'm glad there wasn't, because I swear to God we would have been out there on the range throwing them at each other, because we're teenagers. But there was belted machine gun ammo, mortar rounds, and tank rounds. And the only one that we really had the experience with was machine gun, but the tank rounds, which are rather large. And a little side note, a bullet, a round, has a firing pin and a primer. And the firing pin, you pull the trigger, it goes click, it hits that primer, it ignites the primer or sparks it, and then the primer lights the powder. It doesn't explode, it actually burns the powder, and the powder fires the projectile. It goes down the tube and it goes off to wherever. A tank round does not require a firing pin. A tank round takes an electrical charge. It's like you're exciting it. So it's a whole different can of worms. The way the gun in the tank works is you have these controls called, it's made by a company called Cadillac Gauge Company. So the controls are called Cadillacs, which is where the name comes from. And you put a round in and you pull the trigger and it sends that little shock of electricity and it hits the round and the round goes boom. On a side note, do you remember the old cowboy and Indian black and white movies, and they're going to go blow up the bank or blow up the dam, and they stick dynamite all over it and they run that wire back, and they have that wooden box with the big T-handle on top? And then the guy grabs the T-handle and pushes down and it goes zing, and then it blows up. Well, that's the same concept. That is an electrical generator, and when you spin it, you're causing power. Well, in a tank, it has the same thing, but it's a twist handle. Off to the left of the gunner's seat, it's red, and I think it's officially called the manual firing apparatus or something, but everybody calls it the master blaster. So if you have an electrical failure or something's not working right, you just reach over and twist the master blaster, and it'll set the round off. And Fort Hood being the size that it is back then, I don't know what's going on today, but back then it's an open post, which means anybody can drive on base from anywhere, and there's probably 35 or 40 different ways to get on post. And every once in a while, in the confusion, somebody would steal a tank round, a main gun round, and they don't use what we call a service round. They use training ammunition, which has a little less charge, and the slug, instead of being depleted uranium, the slug is aluminum. Still makes a big boom when it goes off, but it's not a service round, as they say. So when somebody steals these rounds, you always know, it quickly turns out who took it, because they run this big tank round home and they go, hey, look what I got. And they set it in the corner of their living room. And then somebody walks across the carpet and gets some static electricity going, and they lose their living room, and we all find out who it was. It's pretty quick. It's usually civilians. It wasn't military personnel. So we have this deuce and a half with all this ammunition piled up, and we go diddy-bopping down to the end of this range, and we are gently, I use this term loosely, gently throwing the ammunition into this big hole that's miles down at the end of this range, and the boxes are breaking open, and we're watching stuff spill out. And something about Army posts, something that's consistent, that if you go out in the bushes on an army, specifically army post. They're not a base, it's a post. And you go digging around the bushes, there's two things you're going to find. Concertina wire, that's the giant slinky with the teeth, or the tactical slinky, as we would refer to it. You're going to find bits and pieces of that all over the place, and you're going to find what's called WD1 wire. It is wire you would hook to a field phone, and you run the wire 300 yards over there, and you stick the wires in and clip, and now you have a hard link between you and your artillery or whatever. And that wire has a tendency to get broken, intentionally, otherwise, artillery. But in training, people have this nasty habit of leaving it. So you'll have wire just out in the bushes. Dig around, you'll find WD1 wire. So we're tossing all this ammunition into this giant hole in the ground. And the crates are breaking open, and the ammunition's spilling out. And this one idiot in the crowd, tall, shockingly handsome, looked kind of like me, goes up, hey, I got an idea. Always a good start to a conversation. Why don't we set this stuff off? We're on a firing range. We're miles from post. Quote, nobody's ever going to know. Hey, buddy, what's up? Giving war stories. And of course, the more level-headed people around me go, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. So they'll find some WD1 wire. So we start digging in the bushes. Sure enough, we find some lines. You grab and start pulling. It goes for a while, and you get the end of it. You go, okay, give me some more. We can keep poking around and find more of this wire. We splice it together. We have maybe 75 yards of this wire total, and we've attached it together and then wired it. We go down into this hole, one of the guys, and there's some tape in the glove box, some electrical tape, and tape these two pieces of wire to the bottom of a tank round and put it in the bottom of the hole, and then strategically place all the ammunition boxes and some of the loose stuff around it, so it's all in one pile. And then we slowly back away with the deuce and a half. So the deuce and a half is facing us. So we're 75 yards away. There's this 10-foot deep hole. The ammunition is down in there. And we're going to set it off like fireworks. It's going to go boom. So we're standing back about, like I said, maybe 75, 80 yards away. And everybody in the military is known by their last name because that's what's on your name tag. And the guy's name was Curry. And the deuce and a half has those old hoods where you pop it and you have to put the stick up. Well, he's going to hit the wire to the battery. So we're all standing there like little kids on the 4th of July, all expectant. I'm standing next to the deuce and a half up by the bumper. And Curry goes, okay, I count down 3, 2, 1. When I woke up, I was about 25 feet behind the deuce and a half, curled up in a ball, and later to discover covered in a white soot as I am looking up at the Hiroshima mushroom cloud that would have made a Hiroshima survivor go, damn, as it rolled up into the sky. And I start to stagger and get up. I can't hear anything because my ears are ringing. I look around and everybody else is in the same state of disrepair that I'm in. And I get up and I'm trying to dust off. Everybody's yelling, but nobody can hear because we're all deaf at this point. And we walk towards the front of the truck, the deuce and a half, and the deuce and a half hood is closed. And the only thing we can see are these two boots sticking out the bottom, 2 little feet sticking out of Curry. And we have to open the hood and drag him out because the blast shoved him into the engine compartment and closed it behind him. Anyway, we're all yelling, and we're still, this mushroom cloud is still rolling over our heads. And we're like, oh, as the Germans would say, Scheiße. So it's time to get out of here, and that's when the nuclear fallout of machine gun bullets started raining out of the sky because it scattered the belted ammunition, and it started plunking around us. I mean, like raindrops, bang, smack, pow. We're all diving for cover, trying to get out from underneath this. And then this big, huge black haze is now hanging over the valley, and then we, of course, in our teenage minds go, we need to get out of here, so just separate ourselves from this area. So we jump in the deuce and a half, and deuce and a halfs are painfully slow. They're very powerful, torque-wise, but they're painfully slow. We're driving it. I still can't hear. And the top's open, and we don't have the top on it. So we're watching, thinking, okay, that cloud's going to go away. The cloud didn't go away. The cloud just stayed there. Big, huge black cloud hanging over this range area. We get up on East, I think we were on East Range Road, and we're driving as fast as the deuce and a half would go, which is about 45 miles an hour. And we're driving, keep looking back. Is it still there? Oh, yeah, it's still there. Driving, okay, still there, yep, still there. So we race back to the motor pool, and we're all trying to come up with an excuse as to why this happened. Oh, there must have been a short, there must have been something. We're all trying to come up with an excuse how this wasn't our fault. And we got back to the motor pool. The the deuce and a half had one of the windows broken, and we actually got one to fix it, and we washed it, and we parked it, and we're waiting for the MPs to come get us because we're, setting off bombs. And nothing happened that day, so the next day it's going to happen. We're going to get, arrested the next day. Didn't happen the next day. Nothing ever came of that. Ever. It just, nothing came of it. We didn't hear anything about it. The engineers didn't say anything. The ASP never contacted. It was just boop, quiet. And we were like, ooh, that was close. But we got away with that one. I don't think the military does that anymore, and I'll tell you why here in a second. I ended up going to flight school from Fort Hood, and I was stationed in Fort Carson, which is Colorado Springs, Colorado. And at one point we flew down there. I don't remember why, but we flew to Fort Hood, and we went over the firing ranges, and there's a frequency for range control. And we dialed them up. I said, are any of the ranges hot? And the guy said no. And I was kind of laughing with Mike that I was flying with. And I said, hey, I want to show you where we set off our quasi-atomic bomb. And we're turning, and I said, there's the hub. There's it's called a permanent dud zone. It's just nobody goes in there. So we were flying. We weren't that high off the ground, and we flew towards the hub, the center of the hub of the range. And that's when I discovered, because I had never been there, that the hub, that mountain was actually more like a volcano. It had a valley in the middle of it. And in the valley, you could see vehicles symmetrically parked. And that got my attention. I said, wait a minute. They told us this was the dud zone. Nobody goes down here. It's off limits. It's, Area 51 on a budget. It's just this. There's nothing here. We flew over it, and there were maybe 200 of those old Army Jeeps parked inside that bowl, which they're probably still there to this day, and they were parked like in a box, bumper to bumper, door to door. They were in a giant box, and we circled around and went back over and looked down, and there, like I said, there's like 200 of them, and that just was mind-boggling that you could see them all. But in the early 80s, they started retiring the Jeeps, and they brought the Humvee out, so the Jeep was on its way out. And ironically, I believe the job I had right before flight school, which was driving for the Division Sergeant Major, Fast Eddie, we had a Jeep, and I think we had the last Jeep in the division. But it dawned on me that I never thought about, well, what happened to all the Jeeps? They didn't bury them, they just parked them, but why there? Because had they put them anywhere else, people would have started stealing them. Stealing parts at the bare minimum, but probably stealing. Everybody would have stolen a Jeep and taken it back to the farm, or taken it back to the ranch. But they put them out there out of sight, out of mind, and just let the elements, eat them, kill them, or however you want to put it, but whatnot. And, which brings us to today. In the Ukraine war, the U.S. government is passing a lot of equipment off on the Ukrainians, and as weird as this sounds, it's actually cheaper to give them this equipment than to dispose of it, because they can't bury it, they can't burn it, they have to keep it, they have to go through a disposal process, and it costs money to dispose of this stuff. And I didn't really think about that until recently. So the ammunition they have to spend money to make go away, it's cheaper. Here, you guys just take it. That makes sense. They're the Patriot missile, that's an anti-aircraft weapon, but somehow they're using it to shoot down missiles. Those have a service life. They have a battery, they have electronics, they have some kind of fuel in it. It has a service life. At the end of its service life, it has to be demobbed. It costs money. So instead, they ship it overseas. It's cheaper to ship it than to dispose of it. And I was like, well, that's kind of smart. Turns out the classic M100 World War II 105 millimeter howitzer, the little short barreled one, they've had a bunch of those in inventory for years and years and years. They quit using them a long time ago, but they have to dispose of them properly. And again, it costs money. And each successive presidential administration has been kicking the can down the road because they saw the price tag. It's going to cost this much money to demo and get rid of all these things. So they said, they just keep kicking the can down. And so finally they said, hey, I got an idea. Let's give them to the Ukrainians. And they did. They gave them a whole bunch of these old and very obsolete but yet fully functional old howitzers that could have, some of which could have dated back to World War II. And they gave it to them and taught them how to use it and gave them all the ammunition that needed to be disposed of. And the Ukrainians are like, this stuff works, we're good. And they're over there using this World War II artillery, and they said it works wonders. It's not the most powerful, it's not the longest range, it's not the most accurate, but it works and it makes a big boom, and they're quite content with that. And I got kind of a kick out of that. Not only are they supplying them with weapons, but they're saving money by supplying them with these old weapons. So that's kind of a backdoor thing you don't really hear about in the Ukraine war and some of the stuff. They've given them some newer stuff, but some of the old inventory that's going to cost money to dispose of is now officially out of the way. And I thought, that's kind of a good recycling thing. And I kind of got a kick out of that. It's something, I don't know how they recycle armored vehicles. I know that Soviet-made armored vehicles, which if you watch on TV, they vaporize when they get hit. They are made out of a curious mix of metals that make them non-recyclable. You can't melt it down and reuse it because it's made of something so weird you can't separate it. And I think they did that on purpose so the enemy can't pick up their scrap and melt it down and reuse it. It's just, there's something about its construction that it doesn't work. But that was my thoughts. It was about how they used to bury everything. Everything was, just bury it, make it go away, bury it. The Soviets are the worst. They had, in the 80s, they had these really nasty nuclear reactors. And they had a core, they had to pull out of like 3 or 4 of them, and they were horrible. And their answer to making them go away was they put them on a ship, took them up north by the Arctic Ocean, and shoved them into the ocean. Oh, out of sight, out of mind. That's just, wow. They literally did that. And now what? That stuff's in the ocean and it's giving off radiation. It's like stupid. But I think in the 90s is when the military stopped doing that. And I knew a guy who lived near Fort Hood in the 70s. And these guys still exist. They're called brass pickers. They would go on ranges and steal empty shell casings and steal the stuff that's dropped during training exercises out there. You fire a machine gun top of a vehicle and there's brass rolling off the top of the machine gun. And that stuff is expensive. And the brass, if you add up a bunch of it, because a bunch rolls off a vehicle, they would go down there, pick it up, and then sell it to a scrap dealer somewhere. This guy could tell me the value of the stuff they were picking up. The tank cannon fired, again, a training round. It wasn't a service round. It was an aluminum slug. And you fire this aluminum slug. And there was by the targets, there would be like an embankment, and you could go to the embankment, do a little digging, and pull this giant slug. When I say a slug, I'm talking about something 5 inches in diameter and 16 inches long. It's a big block of aluminum. Let's see. Hey brother, Oakland, California. As a kid, I used to live in San Ramon, on a side note, by the way, right by where you are. He said those things, those slugs were worth, this back in the 70s, the weight and the density of the slug, they were worth like $5.72 a piece if he'd go out and pick a whole bunch of them. But these guys would go down range and steal slugs and steal brass casings. And they kind of curtailed some of that by the time I joined, by the time I was there in the 80s on the firing ranges. And what would happen is those spokes I was talking about release the Trump and Epstein files. Yeah, I agree. I think they should release the Trump files. I don't know what the Trump files, but the Epstein files. There are going to be people on there, because there is a list. There's going to be people on there that someone's protecting. And if Trump was on there, you would have known about it. If they're willing to try to shoot the guy, try to assassinate him, then they would have released him. But he's not on there, unfortunately, for them. They can't use that. Oh, where the heck was I? When I was talking about the hubs of the firing ranges, the spokes, a firing range is about, I'm going to say, a mile wide and maybe 4 or 5 miles long. And there's a big embankment on either side. It's like you drop down into the range and you've got these 40, 50 foot tall embankments on either side. Hey, y'all from Florence Valley, Kentucky. Hey, that's cool. I go through Kentucky all the time out here on this job. And you drive down this range, and how you do a tank range is you start at the top, and they tell you, okay, go down here to your first firing position. Now you're loaded with ammunition. This is going to lead into a funny story, by the way. You're loaded with ammunition. You have a green flag and a red flag. A green flag means you're not firing, but that red flag means you have ammunition on board. Hey there, I'm having a hard time reading this because of the light. Bowmaster, hi, too late, well, hi back at you. You drive down range, and you stop, and you've got the green, the red flag, and your gun is up and down range. And you stop, and then you can hear range control talking. And somebody found out way back in the day that you plug your headset into the wall, and you're listening, and you have a toggle switch. If you flip it back, you're talking internally. If you flip it forward, you're transmitting. So when they were doing the firing, somebody found out if you put the wires in backwards, you were constantly transmitting the conversation inside the tank. So when they're grading you, because everything's all standardized in the firing range, they can hear everything that was going on, the crew discussion and how they talk. So that's, in the case of the combat losses, you could just grab somebody out of this vehicle and put them in that vehicle, and they're going to do the same thing. So that's why they standardized that way. So, of course, we had all kinds of gang signs and stuff because we wanted to say things we didn't want anybody hearing on the range. But you go down range and you get ready to fire, but day and night, somebody had to sit across the road behind the range up on a peak and look and watch for brass pickers, because they would appear. They would, all of a sudden, we're firing live on a range, and then a mile down the road, you see somebody running around on foot or driving around. And then they'd have to stop the range, and then the range control would send a vehicle down to run the guy off, and they always disappear, and then we go back to firing, and then the guy would reappear. The problem with this is this kept us out in the field longer, and nobody wants to be out in the field longer because it's hot and it's miserable and you're wearing heavy clothing. So that got real frustrating after a while. And range control is a little air traffic control tower, and it's run by civilians. They're not military personnel, and they would clear the range hot, shut it down cold, and they ran, again, as civilian contractors, they ran the targets to shoot. They would do their thing. So at night, they couldn't see what was happening. So you were not only were you watching for people on range, you were kind of spotting the shot, because if the shot would hit the target and the target would drop, and their computer, the guys up at the tower couldn't see it, they would call and go, well, did he hit that one? You say yes, no, and you were kind of a spotter for the whole thing. So we're out in the range and doing our thing, and the crew that would go down the hill would drive and stop, and they say, okay, range is hot, and they'd give a fire command, and they'd pop up from your berm and shoot a target that's moving or a target that's not moving, and then they would drive to the next one and shoot. And then they would do driving fire while you were driving, and they'd work their way to the back part of the range. And then when they were done with all the engagement, it took a while. Interesting things that happened in the whole time I was there really cracked me up was they had some brass pickers that kept appearing downrange, and these guys at this point weren't stealing shells, they were stealing the generators The generators that were powering the targets, they were like portable ones. They had them, put them behind a berm so we couldn't damage them. They were starting to steal those, and it was, again, extending our time in the field that nobody wants to do. And we're up across the hill, and and they get ready to fire, and then the guys appeared, the brass pickers appeared. And they shut it down, and they drive down there, and they disappear, and they come back, and they get ready to fire, and they reappear. We see them. And we're across the street, and they say, "Hey, are the brass pickers down there?" We're like, "Nope, it's clear. It's clear." And the tank below us, because we're on a hilltop, the tank, you can see him moving the gun, and he's looking right at it. It's thermal sights. It's thermal night sights. And he's looking right at him. You could tell he's looking at him. We're like, "No, we didn't say anything." He's like, "Yeah, we're good." And they call the range hot, and the guy goes up to start firing, and the dudes that are brass picking down there are driving a pickup truck. And they get out of the pickup truck and start walking, and they're 100 feet from the truck, and the range goes hot. And the tank turns at night and fires one of these aluminum slugs and hits the truck, hits the rear end of it. The truck jumps up in the air and turns around. These two guys take off running. And the range control goes, "Oh, we don't have a sensing on the target." And they go, "No, he's good, he hit it." And it's like, "All right." And they continued down and finished their runs, and they got to another position. They fired and hit the truck again, another tank round. It's not explosive, just a slug, and each successive crew would shoot that truck with their training rounds. And we didn't have to wait on the brass pickers out. We don't know where they went. They ran off. We didn't see them anymore after that. And I got a kick out of that. And the one other really weird thing that happened on the ranges Fort Hood was, like I said, you're up at the top of the hill, and then when you enter the range, you go down the hill, and you're kind of dropping off into a bathtub. So it's a very large bathtub. And when you're at the top of the hill, the tank doesn't just drive around willy-nilly. The tank has to follow a ground guide, which is a person walking, and it can't go any faster than the guy's walking. So you come to the top of the hill, your tank is up and down range. You get to the top and you turn to the right, your tank turns and keeps up and down range. That's the rules. It doesn't matter which way the tank's going, that gun is up and down range, red flag, green flag. You grab ammunition, you're not firing. But when you're firing, you take the green flag down. Well, we're up here doing our thing. We got our M1 tanks. The National Guard, the 49th Lone Star comes out every year, and they National Guard, they're kind of a dumpster fire, and they get half a dozen people killed every summer during their training. Back then, they're disorganized, and they had the old M60 tanks, and they were on a range next door to ours, doing their thing, and we're kind of ignoring them doing our thing. And one of our tanks, there's a speaker. We can hear the conversation inside the tank. And they go the 150, 200 yards down range, and they stop, and they're having problems with targets. The targets are popping up and down, up and down. We're kind of sitting there dazed out, and a tank on the National Guard range to our right fires around, which you can see them. They're tracer tipped. You can see a tank round. Fires around from the top of the range, their range, across into our range, which they can't see if they were in their range, but they're backed out of it, and it goes sailing over the top of our tank downrange. Boom, zing, and you watch it go flying by. Now, don't get me wrong, that round's not going to penetrate, but you're firing a projectile. And there's like dead silence, and this dude, this backwoods hillbilly kid's in the tank, and you could hear him talking amongst themselves. He goes, "Hey, Sergeant Rich, I think someone just shot us." And he goes, "What?" And they go, you hear on the radio, "Ceasefire all ranges, ceasefire all ranges." And we're watching this go. And the tank, that M60 tank over next door, is still aiming towards our tank on our range. And we're all standing there going, did that just happen? And then that tank fired a second time. And the round almost clipped the top of it. And he tells the tank, Sergeant Richardson was his name, that's why, Sergeant Richardson, he says, "Back up, hold the track, we're going up range." He goes, "Hold the gun," meaning keep the turret pointed down range. Backs up, spins around, and he tells the driver, uprange, fast you go, and he says, kick it in the ass. That means get after it. Now, an M1's got some automotive performance for a tank. He says, kick it in the ass. And he goes hauling ass, and this guy goes, oh, Sergeant Reach, what's happening? And it's quiet in the tank. And he says, if they shoot at us one more time, boom, there goes the third round. And he tells that I don't remember his name, he says, get that blankety blank green flag down. He reaches up, we watch him, pulls the green flag, disappears. The tank commander, whatever his name was, grabs that turret, spins it around, points it at the tank, and we're standing here watching this unfold on the other range. He's coming up the hill going about 40, 45 miles an hour, and he spins that gun tube around, and he calls off a proper fire command, and he launches a round out of the gun, aluminum slug, that hits the side of the turret and bounces and jumps off into space. I can assure you they had those guys' attention at that time. And he hit the top of the, they hit the top of the, coming back out, you know, where they ground guide you at walking speed. They hit the top of the range, the tank power slid, and then raced over to their range, and we're running, we're all heading that way. And he's still got the tank cannon pointed at him, and it's, you can hear him talking, it's reloaded, they're not, you know, they're not shutting down. And he ran over there, and you want to talk about a dust up, they had a stand down all over post. That E5 got out and cussed out the tank, their unit, their leadership. I mean, he let them have it, and there was this big skid mark where this aluminum slug slammed into the turret, disappeared into outer space. Oh, God, I wish we had cell phones back then. That would have been awesome. But anyway, that was the two, yeah, that was the two funny things that happened on those ranges while I was playing Army back in the day. But that was great. I don't think anything like that goes on anymore, because that was 40 years ago, and I think things were a little more, shall we say, loosey-goosey how they operated in the military. I imagine they tightened that up. But I crewed the M1A nothing. It was the 105 cannon that, you know, they talk about on the news, the M1A1 and the M1A2 and 3. I was an A nothing. It was the originals. I don't even know what they did with them, unless they retrofitted them. I don't know what happened in those vehicles. Alrighty, that was the noise for now. I just wanted to talk. I like running my mouth, and I used to write. I just run my mouth now. Alrighty, take care.